But further west, well, weather fronts are arriving from the Atlantic. They're the cause of the cloudy and damp weather in western Scotland, and that weather will push into Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, as well as northern and western England and Wales through the night. With the cloud thickening and those outbreaks of rain arriving, it is a mild night in the north and the west. But in central and southeastern parts of England, 5 Celsius in many places, even a touch lower in some sheltered spots. So a chilly start for the Midlands, eastern England, but a bright start here. And we keep some sunny spells into the afternoon, although clouds will tend to build. Elsewhere, that mild but damp start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy rain for a time through the central belt and southern Scotland. Those heavy bursts of rain push into northern England, clearing Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brighter skies here, 13 or 14 Celsius. 17 Celsius in the southeast with some sunshine in the afternoon. But the cloudy zone in the middle, I think, will make it feel a bit cooler than the last couple of days, for example. That cloud bringing some heavy showers late afternoon, early evening through northern England, the Midlands, Wales. But those showers, as they push southeastwards, tend to peter out. And well, by dawn on Thursday, looks like clear skies once again for many places. As a result, in the north in particular, it's going to be a chilly start to the day. Temperatures in some spots down below freezing. But a bright start for much of Scotland, northern England, the Midlands, Wales. I think some lingering cloud there in the east of England, but that also clears by around lunchtime. However, by this stage, outbreaks of rain are returning to the southwest. And those spells of rain will move across much of the country during the second half of Thursday. Windy and showery on Friday.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Mark Dolan. Have the commentators got Trussonomics all wrong? Ex-Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce and co-chair of Leave Means Leave, John Longworth, explains why the political, media and financial establishment should get behind the PM's economic reforms. Plus, there's opinion galore from trigonometry host Constantine Kissin, a State of Fear author Laura Dodsworth, and my superstar panel, media personality Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hey, welcome along to Monday's Mark Steyn Show. On tonight, to hell with it. Let's just cut to the chase.
What do you make of this back and forth? Putin says, I might use nukes, and the White House is pretending like, he probably won't. And meanwhile, the president's behind closed doors telling donors it's going to be Armageddon?
Yeah, I wish my advice to the president, he won't take it, but my advice is don't say a word.
That's General Keith Kellogg, former National Security Advisor of the United States government, casually gaming out nuclear Armageddon scenarios on Washington's #1 talk radio station. How would a giant mushroom cloud in the heart of Europe impact? Oh, there's why. I don't think this is live, by the way. This might just be one we made earlier, as they say on the cookery shows. That mushroom cloud, how might a mushroom cloud impact the price cap on your heating bill? Has AstraZeneca maybe got a booster jab for a big mushroom cloud over Europe? Also on tonight's show, the Northern Ireland Protocol, Baroness Hoey will join us live from the House of Lords, where the big debate is underway. These last 2 crazy years, were they all premised on a big lie? Rob Roos, a Dutch member of the European Parliament, joins us to discuss a staggering admission. He's here live, and he's gonna let you know all about that. And does childlessness make you left-wing? Natalie Winters is here with a new peer-reviewed study. Plus, Andrew Lawton, the man himself, our Armageddon Out of Here correspondent. And, of course, the most important part of the show, that's you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. All coming up, assuming they don't drop the big one in the next 60 minutes. First, as always, Polly Middlehurst with the latest news. Over to you, Polly.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. The King's coronation will take place on the 6th of May next year. King Charles III will be crowned alongside Camilla, Queen Consort, according to Buckingham Palace. The coronation will take place at Westminster Abbey 8 months after the death of Her Majesty the Queen. The date also marks the birthday of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's son, Archie, who'll be turning 4 on the same day. More than 2,000 people are set to fill the Abbey to watch the historic event. The Chancellor says he remains committed to measures set out in his recent mini-budget, despite further intervention from the Bank of England today. The central bank was busy buying up government debt again, having warned of additional risk to the UK's financial stability. Facing questions in the Commons, Kwasi Kwarteng described current support for households and businesses as strong, and he also refused calls from his own party to streamline spending on HS2 and Quangos, and instead lower taxes for small businesses.
Consider the measures we've already introduced. National insurance hikes have been reversed, corporation tax rise has been scrapped, and the annual investment allowance remains at £1 million. These are measures which small businesses up and down the land have been very, very appreciative of.
Well, a leading economic think tank estimates the Chancellor will need to cut around £60 billion worth of spending if he wants to convince investors that he can get public finances back under control. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the shortfall is a consequence of measures announced since Liz Truss became Prime Minister. Well, the Deputy Prime Minister, Therese Coffey, refused to reveal if the government plans to cut public spending.
I'm very conscious that with our plan for growth, we're seeking to grow the economy. But of course, we want to have sensible fiscal discipline too. But I can't say right now exactly how the overall picture will look. But I'm confident we will continue to see increasing investment in public sector services, but making sure that we do that carefully with taxpayers' money while we also stimulate the economy to grow.
The Prime Minister says G7 leaders will not waver in their resolve to help Ukraine achieve peace. The comment comes after President Zelensky joined Liz Truss and other heads of state to discuss the recent spate of Russian attacks. He's calling on leaders to give his country enough air defence capability to stop Russia. In a statement, leaders condemned Moscow for targeting civilians and said the act constituted a war crime. And some breaking news we're receiving within the last half hour or so. A British businessman has been arrested and charged with conspiring to violate sanctions imposed by the US government on a Russian oligarch. The US Department of Justice says Graham Bonham Carter carried out more than £900,000 worth of illicit transactions to fund real estate properties for Oleg Deripaska's benefit. The Department of Justice says they'll be seeking Mr Bonham Carter's extradition. That news just into us here at GB News. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where it's time now to go over to Mark Steyn.
Thank you very much, Polly. I don't know what that Bonham Carter guy has done, but he shouldn't be extradited to the United States because it has a dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt federal justice system that wins 97% of its cases without even going to trial. I think that's the kind of success rate that even Saddam Hussein or Hosni Mubarak would have thought made you look a little implausible and non-credible. We tried to talk about the stuff that Matt just thought, just throw that in there, bring on the Ofcom complaints. We're happy to have the US ambassador on or the Attorney General of the United States if they want to object to my characterization of that, but screw it anyway. We try to talk about the stuff that matters on this show. I hear rumours of a cabinet reshuffle. Who's going to be the new Lord Privy Seal? Big deal. It doesn't matter. It's like a soap opera cast only with extras. Who cares? Cost of living, yeah, that's a big deal. And migrants and grooming gangs and underperforming COVID booster shots. But it all pales into insignificance next to switching on the telly and seeing a big mushroom cloud. Particularly if there goes that mushroom cloud again. Is it getting closer? Where's that now? It's not Calais, is it? Particularly if the wind changes direction, you could be in big trouble. In Washington right now, everyone's talking about using nukes, deploying nukes, going nuclear, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Here, for example, is General Keith Kellogg, former acting national security advisor, breezily chit-chatting on the radio about Putin going nuclear.
So you basically call his bluff on it. Now, if he does use it, okay, that takes us to a different level. I think if he uses it at all, it'd be a non-strategic nuclear weapon into Ukraine. But if he does that, then what he's basically done is I think Russia as a nation as we know it is gone.
Russia as a nation as we know it is gone. Any other nations that we know are going to be gone too? So we're no longer talking about mutually assured destruction. The general is just talking about containing it very cleverly to Russia's assured destruction. So don't worry about it. In 2020, it was 15 days to flatten the curve. Now it's 15 days to flatten the bear. After the last 3 years, do you really trust the guys who rule us to be able to pull that off? We are governed by the crappiest elites in human history. They took a Chinese coronavirus so deadly that, according to the latest government statistics for England and Wales, its median age of death is currently 4 years higher than UK life expectancy. This is a graph from our stats man, Jamie Jenkins. And in fact, over the entirety of the pandemic, going all the way back almost 3 years now, the median age of death from COVID is still higher than life expectancy. Yet our leaders, in pursuit of raising the median age of death of COVID death from its present 85 to maybe 93, 97, 112, have destroyed everything else in our society. They're made a wasteland of jobs, of inflation, of energy prices, of children's lives. When I use the word wasteland, I am speaking metaphorically, of course. The basic infrastructure of our world, buildings and roads, are still standing. So they're now moving on to that. Are the geniuses who've made the last 3 years really the guys you want dancing on the nuclear precipice? We're going to get into Armageddon with Andrew Lawton in a few minutes, but let me know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Elsewhere, the great walkback continues. As we've reported in Scandinavia, the Swedish government will no longer recommend the COVID vaccines for those under 18. The Danish government will no longer recommend them for those under 50. The Norwegian government for those under 65. On Friday, The Surgeon General of Florida, that's the chief medical officer there, announced the state now recommends against the vaccines for men aged 18 to 49 because of an 84% increase in cardiac-related deaths among young men. 84% increase. When the Surgeon General tweeted out his decision to cease recommending the vaccines, Twitter, of course, immediately marked it as disinformation and vaporized the tweet, although it is, in fact, a correct statement of Florida policy. When our friend Dr. Asim Malhotra attempted to repost the Florida announcement on Facebook, that got totaled too. By the way, here is the Surgeon General of Florida. Look at that guy, handsome fellow. So the 12-year-old gender-ambiguous, whitey white privileged, whiter than Frosty the Snowman after he's fallen in a vat of Tipex, whitey whitest, trusty fundies of Silicon Valley are telling a black man he has to go sit at the back of the cyber bus. I guess he got a little too uppity for you rednecks over at Big Tech, didn't he? How do the rednecks of Full Fact feel about the uppity black guy? But the Surgeon General is not wrong. We have the sudden deaths of the young and middle-aged reported daily without curiosity. Healthy 31-year-old dies a month before his wedding day. 26-year-old trainee solicitors. Healthy young 20-year-old students on the cusp of adulthood. Even a congressman's 17-year-old daughter. But what if the entire premise of the vaccines for all, vaccines for everyone, vaccines for all 8 billion people on the planet, what if the entire premise of it was a fraud? You're young, you're healthy, you have no need of this medication for yourself, but everyone from the Queen down is telling you you need to get it so you don't kill Granny. Here's Chris Whitty in April 2021. Public Health England data show up to 50% reduction in transmission of COVID from the first vaccine. What are the implications of that? Oh, getting a vaccine helps protect others. And this is likely to be even more improved by getting your second dose. Well, that's good enough for government work. Chris Whitty got a knighthood out of it. But was it actually true? There was a disturbing exchange yesterday in the European Parliament. A Dutch MEP asked the following question. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. To which Janine Small, President of International Developed Markets at Pfizer and its regional president of vaccines, responded, and we're going to put this up on screen for you. Quote, did we know about stopping immunization before it's entering the market? No, we had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk. Oh, I'll tell you what, let's play her saying it. Here we go. Take it away, Janine.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around did we know about Stop and Humanization before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
The speed of science. Janine Small lives in southern England, and apparently English is her first language, though you might not get that impression from that answer. The man who asked the question of her is Rob Roos. He's a Dutch member of the European Parliament, and he joins us now. Rob, this is a significant admission by Pfizer, is it not?
Yes, it is. I think it's the first time that that someone admitted this. And it was an important question. I asked this question also to AstraZeneca and Moderna, but they made a workaround and they didn't give me an answer. But Pfizer was very clear in speaking out, and I think it's important because of this narrative. You have to do it to protect your grandparents, and you do it for others. You do it for all of society. All that. All the messages that was brought by all the governments here in the West, because of that, the Corona Pass was introduced, and it had a significant impact on people's lives. There were people who were not able to work, who lost their job, people who lost their businesses, families were divided, and also friends. I think it's, and now it seems to be a disinformation from our governments.
Yeah. Well, if you just to look at those governments, you'll remember that Monsieur Macron in France said he wanted to emmerder the unvaccinated, which is a rather rude word, approximates to the English. He wanted to really piss them off. If you look at Canada, for example, if you were unvaccinated, you were forbidden from getting on an aeroplane or a train. In some German states, you were forbidden from going to the supermarket to buy food to keep yourself alive. And it appears that this lady from Pfizer is now saying at the time they introduced this, they never had any evidence that it would stop transmission of the virus. So where did all these governments get the idea to tell us you can't go anywhere if you're unvaccinated?
Well, yeah, that is exactly what I was looking for, because I'm searching for this answer for 2 years now. And because it had such an impact on people's life, I really wanted to know. And, well, yeah, where is this coming from? It seems to be disinformation from our government. So, well, this is really something that the people who are responsible for this, in my opinion, if the impact was huge on people's lives, I think these people should be held responsible.
Well, we've heard all this talk. I mean, as I'm sure you know, and you've been exposed to it as well, that if you question anything you're told by the government, people say you're not following the science. The lady from Pfizer basically just told you that there's no science behind any of these statements, that when people say you can't go into a restaurant and have a cup of coffee if you're unvaccinated, that's just something that a government made up out of it, basically pulled it out of its own bottom and inflicted it on society.
Yes. Exactly. Follow the science, and we still see that on all the social media. If you make a post about, I'm in this COVID committee, so I try to inform people by showing them the questions and the answers. We do not really get real answers, but this was exceptional and a very important one. But if you make a post about COVID and about real questions you ask, you immediately get a sign beneath your post about COVID, this COVID warning. They also removed me. I was cancelled from LinkedIn by exposing just simple questions. So it's still going on, and especially that there is no scientific basis for this narrative. I think it's, for me it was really surprising that I received this answer, but it's very necessary that it has come out. We should never have any COVID passport again based on this so-called science.
No, absolutely. God bless you for answering that question. And countries that are still using your vaccination status to determine whether you can come in and out of them, like the United States is, a foreign national cannot enter the United States if he isn't vaccinated. Vaccination does nothing. As the Pfizer lady had said, they didn't do any research They didn't have any science backing up the idea that it would prevent transmission. You have extracted a hugely useful answer, Rob, and we congratulate you. We hope you'll go back to the AstraZeneca and Moderna guys and maybe get something more straightforward out of them. We have asked Janine Small, President of International Developed Markets at Pfizer and Regional President of Vaccines, who lives in the United Kingdom. We have asked her on our show, and we have a standing invitation to her if she wants to come on and expand on the answer that she gave to you. Thank you very much, Rob. Up next, we're going to get to your thoughts, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Lady Hoey, we hope will be here on the Northern Ireland Protocol, live from the House of Lords. It's all just careering to the close of the big debate. They've had dozens of speakers, and if that protocol, Northern Ireland Protocol, it all sounds a bit heavy and serious, we do have some lighter fare for you. That's Nuclear Armageddon. Boy, that's some big laughs right there, and that's coming next with Andrew Lawton. Most of our faintly unrespectable guests that we feature on this show are merely metaphorically radioactive, but Andrew actually is radioactive. If you break into the studio, you can touch his radioactive waste. Don't touch that dial, you'll never know what you'll find on some of these other channels. We're coming right back.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let us channel what the people are saying. We wanted to know whether you think we're on the verge of nuclear war. Joe Biden does, but he's just the alleged leader of the free world, so what does he know? Stephen says, we need cool heads who will pursue a peaceful end to this dreadful war, not fuel it. But unfortunately, I don't see such leadership. Kim says, yes, Putin will never back down. The more he is threatened, the more he will retaliate. Susie is quoting Einstein. This was in the good old days. People used to shove this quote at you all the time. I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. That was when the left was worried. Do you remember the campaign for nuclear disarmament and all that? They used to go and protest against Air Force bases over cruise missiles and that kind of thing. Back then, back 40 years ago, The left never stopped. They wrote plays, they did cartoons, they produced books about nuclear war because the world was in the hands of crazy madmen. They did a big picture, a parody of the Gone with the Wind poster with Mrs. Thatcher and President Reagan locked in embrace like Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, and behind them a giant nuclear cloud. The whole world was going to blow at any moment, and now the left is totally relaxed about it. Totally relaxed. And we've had more nuclear talk in the past 7 months over the Ukraine war than in the previous 7 decades. Odd. The Ukraine war, as you will have noticed, is actually escalating now because we've had the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines and the bombing of that Russo-Crimean bridge. And the question then is, what's next? And as we heard earlier, this is where it gets interesting. The former National Security Advisor, General Keith Kellogg, says, escalation-wise, you ain't seen nothing yet. So how about Putin nuking Ukraine? Don't worry, that's the good news, because aside from a big smoking crater where Lviv used to be, it'll only be Putin feeling the heat.
Vince, my point was if he uses a non-strategic nuclear weapon, we call tactical nukes, which I hate, if he uses that, you don't do anything. Yeah, you basically say if it happens in there, you don't escalate, because when you start escalating, then you're going to a global nuclear war and you don't want to go there. But if he uses that, then the entire world, and I guarantee you, the entire world says, I'm done with this guy, to include China, and then he's eventually gone.
I'm done with this guy, and then he's eventually gone. Russia has, in fact, more nuclear weapons than any other nation, and if you think about it, if you cross the psychological threshold of firing the first nuke, it's presumably easier to loose off a second or third or a couple of dozen. But the big fingers in Washington are now trying to goad Putin into going nuclear, because that'll make the Chinese, let me see if I follow this, because that'll make the Chinese and the Iranians mad with him, and then they'll be done with him, and then he'll be gone, and all those nukes will be in the hands of some other guy whom we don't presumably know, but whoever winds up running things in the Kremlin. With me now is Andrew Lawton from True North. He's also the author of the best-selling book, The Freedom Convoy. Andrew, the nuclear precipice, how are you finding it so far?
I remember when there used to be that, like, doomsday clock that everyone focused on about how close we were to nuclear annihilation. And I think that so many of the usual suspects have been focused on climate Armageddon. They just, like, don't care about nuclear Armageddon anymore. I mean, that thing should be like 5 seconds to midnight now, and no one cares about it.
No, I think I saw another smarty pants from some American think tank say there's actually a 1 in 6 chance of nuclear war now. Which they all seem fairly relaxed. I mean, I can understand. I guess that's about, what is that, the same odds as the Pfizer vaccine these days? I don't know. 1 in 6 chance of nuclear war. Everybody's talking about this as if talking about nuclear Armageddon, as Joe Biden was doing, at a fundraiser, because it's good for his business model. Everybody has somehow internalized this idea that talking about nuclear Armageddon is kind of normal now.
It's the epitome of denial. And I mean, if you even listen to the White House, they have their president talking about nuclear Armageddon, but then they're saying, well, no, we're not changing our nuclear posture. Everything's fine. Everything's the same. The whole premise of mutually assured destruction was that Russia fires a nuke and then the United States fires a nuke back. They're talking about public relations nuclear annihilation, and the embarrassment of nuking the world is going to be what defeats Russia, which is not exactly how I remember the MAD scenarios playing out.
No, this is actually nuttier than anything in Dr. Strangelove. They're saying, so we're going to let Putin go ahead and nuke Ukraine because he'll never be able to cope with the bad press.
But just a little nuke. That's what in that interview you were saying. Just a little tiny nuke in Ukraine. If he does a little nuke. So when this eventually happens, if the horrible does happen, the U.S. will be measuring the size of the nuke to determine whether letting it go and just sort of finger wagging is a sufficient enough response.
Yeah, I don't think it will be, actually. I don't think... well, let me ask you this, because we've had this since day one of the war. They were showing these pictures of Putin looking puffy face. He's a very sick man. He's obviously bonkers. He's nuts. I notice these days, I was just tootling along listening to the BBC. That was my first mistake. And they had a feature on how, you know, Kanye West, who'd said something they didn't like, so he must be mentally ill. Who would you think is nuttier here? Putin, who's waging a vicious, brutal, old-fashioned war, or these guys in Washington who are saying, yeah, I think we should just let him loose off a small nuke and that'll be his big mistake? Who's the nuttier here?
Yeah, I mean, the armchair psychiatry about Vladimir Putin, I note, is never directed to Joe Biden, which I think is their first mistake. But I also...
Well, because, you know, if you're trying to read someone's mind, the guy has to have a mind.
Well, yes, that is
so
true.
So he doesn't meet the minimum criterion there.
But it is baffling to me that this has been, as you mentioned, normalized, and everyone accepts that this is just the standard order of things. And when you hear former generals talking about outsmarting Putin by doing nothing, as though that's really going to throw him off his game, you have to wonder who's in charge. But then you look at Afghanistan, and nothing seems all that surprising.
Well, that's a very good point. We saw the nation that accounts for 40% of global military spending lose to goat herds with fertilizer. And yes, it's true that the British and NATO were in that and own that defeat as well. But basically, the Americans ran that war and they lost that war. I mean, why should we think they'd be any better at winning a nuclear war?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you go back to 2012 and Mitt Romney was mocked for talking about things that everyone said belonged in the Cold War. And I think there's been such a desire to move beyond that people forget some of those dynamics are still very much alive and well today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the famous moment in the debate when Romney brought up Russia and Obama sneered, oh, the 1980s just called, they'd like their foreign policy back. Why do you think the left, this determination, this transformation of Putin, who is certainly a thug and he's certainly a bloodthirsty thug, but why the need to turn him into a cartoon villain who's behind everything? He was apparently running the Trump White House. Then Trump managed to get out of the White House, so then he moved on to threatening nuclear war. What have we done to Putin that to make him into this cartoon villain here?
I think the left has been fighting for years this idea that there are enemies in other countries. I mean, the left has tried to make its primary enemy the one within. They've tried to make their primary villains the right.
Yeah.
And I think that right now, when you do have a real villain, they've done so much to neuter that narrative because it would prove they were wrong all those years about foreign policy.
Yeah, that's true, actually. The whole thing with foreign policy and the left is that there are no enemies, just friends whose grievances we haven't yet accommodated. And that's true whether it's fire-breathing Ayatollahs or the Chinese Communist Party. So the demonization of Putin is odd here. Do you actually think, I mean, a 1 in 6 chance of nuclear war, if you'd said to somebody in July 1914, anywhere in the Habsburg Empire, there's a 1 in 6 chance of a world war that will leave millions dead, people would have thought you were ridiculous, but it happened the following month. Why do you think there's a real danger of this?
I think there is a danger, and certainly I don't think that the United States response is helping matters. But I think a lot of the time there's been so much of an emphasis on these dozens and dozens of denuclearization treaties that have taken place over the last 40, 50 years, and few people have looked at the underlying thing. And when everyone is in agreement about what's going to happen, these things are fantastic. But Russia was a part of those discussions as well, and where has it gotten us?
Yeah, that's true, actually, and the wages of entering, the cost of entering the nuclear club has sunk dramatically over the past half-century. So now you can have countries like North Korea, which doesn't actually make anything except knock off Viagra, and they can be a nuclear power. So that basically means anyone can be a nuclear power. We are tap dancing on the edge of the precipice, and the guy running the free world, supposedly Joe Biden, is not a great tap dancer. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to talk again tomorrow, assuming we're still here. Stump the Steyn is looming. You can ask me anything. GBviews at gbnews.uk. And Natalie Winters is here with what may be just as fundamental an issue as nuclear war when it comes to the future of our society. Natalie's standing by, and we love to get her take on things. It's coming right up. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
We have breaking news on GB News. A great actress, a star of stage and screen, is dead. Angela Lansbury died at the age of 96, same age as Her Late Majesty, and she was playing on Broadway and doing television until fairly recently. She was in a fabulous movie from about 60 years ago, The Manchurian Candidate. And actually, if you watch that film, it might seem very relevant to things going on today, by which I mean Joe Biden is the Manchurian candidate. Angela Lansbury came from a great Labour Party family, and then she made a name for herself in Hollywood. She goes all the way back to the early 1940s, the Harvey Girls with Judy Garland, and once she was on the screen, she never stopped. I had a slight antipathy towards her, because at one point, when I used to make documentaries, I'd be presenting documentaries, and we'd try and sell them to PBS in the United States and similar networks. And PBS always said, you know, we really like this documentary. What we'd like to do is cut out that Steyn guy and put Angela Lansbury in to present it. So I had an slight antipathy to her over that. But when I ran into her, she said that was nothing to do with her, and she would be quite happy to watch me in it. Do look out something like The Manchurian Candidate. I know everyone knows her from Murder, She Wrote, which ran for years on television, but do look out The Manchurian Candidate. That's an incredible performance. We talk a lot about fertility rates on this show. That means babies, of which there are increasingly few. Many years ago, I wrote a best-selling book on demography, and you try doing that. Nigel had an author on earlier explaining how difficult it is to do a best-selling book. Well, I tell you, a best-selling book on demography is a hell of a trick to pull off. In that book, I put it this way: the future belongs to those who show up, and right now the British, the Europeans, the Japanese, even the Americans aren't showing up. And if that trend continues, that means the future will be made by others. But a new study in all four corners of the world suggests that the huge lack of babies may explain this weird intermediate phase we're in. Here to discuss is our chum Natalie Winters, Chief Investigative Reporter of the National Pulse. Basically, this is a very respectable study. It's from the Journal of the Royal Society in London, but they've drawn researchers from all over the planet for it.
Yes, several researchers, they conducted a case study with thousands of participants with data spanning really the entire world, going back several years. They conducted 4 separate studies, and really the overall kind of theories that they were looking into and really found evidence to support was that having children, and frankly, the more children you have, makes you not only more conservative, but actually more likely to reject socially liberal, although who knows what liberal means today, but traditionally socially liberal ideas, including abortion, homosexuality, promiscuity, or some of the other indexes that they sought to analyze. But this really kind of, I think, speaks to the phrase that you hear, oh, you'll understand once you have children. And really, I think evidence is in support something that you and I know, and most people know, that having children, having, a generation, having a connection to the future generation that you want to fight for makes you more likely to want to preserve that. And when you don't, and of course you see, organizations that are Marxist to their core, like Black Lives Matter, assaulting the family unit, the family unit in its traditional sense. It's probably one of the largest victims of the, far left, but internationally and domestically too, but what they're going after. So I think this study kind of speaks to why.
Well, just because people watching this will be saying, it can't quite be as simple as that, can it? That childlessness leads you to left-wing, a left-wing life and left-wing views, and having children leads you in a right-wing direction. But that's basically what this study kind of found, isn't it?
Exactly. And they actually sought to kind of disprove linking social conservatism to age, because another trend that a lot of people assume is that as one gets older, they tend to lean more conservative. But in this study, they isolated for that variable and found that it really was having children that made the largest difference in terms of shaping political views. This, of course, comes as we see, in addition to groups like Black Lives Matter, the hardcore climate activists shaming and pushing people to have, frankly, no children at all, because it's bad for the environment, it's bad for your CO2 emissions. So I think this sort of speaks to the scientific side of why you see a lot of these left-leaning, really, let's call them what they are, Marxist groups, really, really going after a traditional family structure, which is, of course, the backbone of society.
Yes, and when you mention the climate activists, I mean, you actually can pick up newspapers and see healthy young women announcing they've had their tubes tied because they don't want to bring children into this world living a Western lifestyle, because that will destroy the planet. The question then becomes, if basically the left then are getting like the Shakers in America, where they were forbidden to breed and then were stunned to discover that they died out. Is something similar going to happen to the left?
Who knows? You bring up sort of a lot of these corporate media outlets embrace of the idea of childlessness and women not wanting to have children. The Guardian very recently put up a story saying that the theory of the maternal instinct within women isn't actually real. It's a far right idea that's conjured up out of thin air. And I think you can also link a lot of this stuff to this denial of gender, this, push for transgenderism, and just really a distortion of what gender means. But, unfortunately, the left's solution to a lot of this has to do with increasing immigration rates. That's sort of their modus operandi. And you can see they cite these declining birth rates as the major impetus for needing to import other cultures into Western countries. So it's sort of I think double-sided nefarious in terms of they don't want people in the West having children, because not only do they then get to import other cultures and disintegrate Western culture, but you also have a, Western population that is then more left-leaning. So it really is evil to its core, I think, when you start to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to me that, because they're in favour of childlessness and they're also in favour of mass immigration. But they always say, a baby in the UK has a carbon footprint 17 times the size of a baby in Somalia. But if you import a population from Somalia, they get a Western-style carbon footprint once they're here. So it'd be much better for the planet if they all stayed in. I mean, there's no logic to any of this. But just to be clear, Natalie, that's a fantastic finding, and it's in the Journal of the Royal Society. It's peer-reviewed up the wazoo. But if you want to read the take-home, read it from Natalie in the National Pulse. Great stuff as always, Natalie. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is having its second reading in the House of Lords. They've been debating, whatever it is, 5-6 hours now with dozens of speakers. Lord Cormac of Enfield has put forward a motion to delay the bill from going to the committee stage for 6 months, which would mean another 6 months with no government at Stormont, but plenty of government for what is supposed to be British sovereign territory coming their way from Brussels. Lady Hoey joins us live from the Palace of Westminster. She's just spoken. Kate, what did you tell their lordships' house tonight?
Well, I told them that anyone who voted tonight to delay was actually going to make sure that there was going to be no devolved government. Could be even forever, but the reality is that we heard 50, I think I was the 53rd speech. We heard loads of speeches from those who were trying to stand up for the European Union rather than stand up for our own country and the rights of our own citizens in Northern Ireland. So I think what we might see, because it is the House of Lords, they try to pretend that they're being very sensible. So we might see Lord Cormac not put the motion. He did give the hint that he would like to see delay at some stage. So what he might do is wait till it goes into committee and then delay. But it was a very good, interesting debate, because we got a lot of people saying really that the protocol wasn't working, something had to give, and many of us said that we didn't trust the European Union to deliver any changes.
I think the reason why those of us in favour of the union are worried by things like, just putting it on hold for 6 months, is because if you talk to people in Ireland, particularly south of the border, they're basically convinced that if they can just sit on this thing, eventually it becomes a fait accompli, eventually it becomes the way things are, and it becomes ever harder to undo it. Do the members of the House of Lords get that?
I would like to think that they did, but the reality is most of them who are opposing the protocol bill didn't want us to leave the European Union, blame the protocol on Brexit rather than on the fact that it was negotiated by our own government. And of course, our own government has now accepted that it isn't working. But a delay isn't really going to change. We've had 300 hours already of negotiations with the European Union, and they haven't even changed the mandate of President Šefčovič, who is negotiating on behalf of the EU. So while he has not got a mandate to change anything drastically, nothing will happen. So there would be 6 months of delay, and then where are we then? I mean, it's so much more important to get the bill on the statute book, which then could well lead to devolved government coming back. But, I'm afraid we saw tonight again many of our peers seemingly not wanting to stand up for British interests, as I told them, but rather the EU interests.
So your theory is that for many of them, their Europhilia, their determination to make the European Union still the paramount enforcer in these islands trumps the actual integrity of the United Kingdom.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, isn't it, that British peers in the House of Lords care more about what the EU thinks and the Irish government than they do about British citizens in Northern Ireland. There were some people who made that point, and of course also the point that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has been very much broken by the protocol, and that's yet what they say they all want to defend. But they only seem to want to defend the north-south parts of it and not the east-west and the bits that allow consent, cross-community consent, which has been changed by the protocol. And we did also hear the history very well of how it all happened. And of course, we wouldn't have had a protocol if Parliament hadn't tried to scupper the democratic will of millions of people who voted to take back control and leave the European Union. We haven't left in Northern Ireland.
Well, it's easy to see what Republicans get out of the protocol because they think this little bit of European bureaucratic finagling can actually bring about their goal of a united Ireland. We're a century on from the creation of the Irish Free State, and they think that after waiting 100 years, this is going to be the final step. They're going to get a united Ireland if they just sit it out. What I don't understand is why the government is so faint-hearted about a principled opposition to that.
Yes, you see, now that they know that, terrorism and bombing and killing Sinn Féin IRA did for so long didn't work, now they're looking towards getting a united economic Ireland. And of course, that's what's happened. The divergence of trade has led more and more businesses in Northern Ireland to have to get their goods from the Republic of Ireland. So they're benefiting from that, while Great Britain isn't. And I think that our own government has been really mealy-mouthed about standing up for our interest. I said in the debate, the Irish government very happy to stand up for nationalists in Northern Ireland. The British government always tries to be neutral. And I don't think our citizens in Northern Ireland deserve to be treated neutrally. Sorry about the police car.
No, I hope they're... I'd like to think they're coming to arrest some of your noble friends, frankly, because you're quite right there. I can't get over this thing. His Majesty's government has no, quote, selfish interest in Northern Ireland. Well, do they have no selfish interest in Scotland or Wales? They have no central selfish interest in the Midlands or Cornwall? I mean, this is ridiculous talk. Someone in London has to speak up for the Union, and we're very glad that you do, Kate. It is great to see you. Thank you very much, and we will stay on this story because it's an important one. Let us stump it out in these final moments. Christo 639910004, possibly not his real name or hers, says, Mark, do you ever feel guilty for spreading such terrible medical misinformation, all in the name of ratings? Oh, his name's Jackson. People will literally be dying because of your show. I hope they haunt you. People are dead. We have huge numbers of excess deaths, 1,000 a week, in England and Wales throughout the spring and summer, not from COVID, but from young people dying of myocarditis, normalising myocarditis for children. That's what ought to haunt you. You bollocksed everything, you buggered everything, you screwed everything, and that's why there are all these excess deaths. The pom-pom girl propaganda, lots of things can be true at the same time. COVID can be a real virus that afflicts elderly people. And at the same time, putting the happy juice in your arm and recommending you get your jabs every 3 months, as some countries have done, can be damaging your immune system. You need to spread your range of acquaintance with the facts. The fact is, problems for female fertility. The fact is, excess deaths among the young and basically people under 60. And you need to think about that. Oh, one more thing. If a good enchilada says, if a tomato is a fruit, why is it never in a fruit salad? Well, my late friend Miles Kington from The Independent, Miles has been dead a few years now, but this is a great line of his. He was asked to explain the difference between wisdom and knowledge. He said, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. Double Mark Dynamite at GB News. Not really, I'm just warming up the old handle for the numero uno, Marco. Mark Dolan of that ilk. What you got, Mark?
Mark Steyn, you have never sat on a fence in your life. You are my hero. What a brilliant show. I echo those sentiments. Great news on the economy, Mark Steyn, that you won't hear anywhere else is Liz Truss's bold budget beginning to bear fruit. That's the topic of my daily digest. As Pfizer admit they did not test the jab for transmission, have we been lied to about the vaccine all along? Mark will be continuing that important conversation you've been having in your show. And is mental health an industry now, a religion? Have we forgotten about the stiff upper lip? Lots to get through. A busy 2 hours. We're live at 9.
He has the stiffest upper lip in the United Kingdom, folks. Mark Dolan. That's so stiff it's freezing my screen. Thank you, Mark Dolan. Don't miss a moment of it. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello again. We've seen wet weather move into the west of Scotland through the day, and it's turning cloudy with outbreaks of rain for many places during the next 24 hours. But the southeast largely avoids the rain. Here, high pressure holds on, at least at first. But further west, well, weather fronts are arriving from the Atlantic. They're the cause of the cloudy and damp weather in western Scotland, and that weather will push into Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, as well as northern and western England and Wales through the night. With the cloud thickening and those outbreaks of rain arriving, it is a mild night in the north and the west. But in